Can you hear me okay? That's what's up. So yeah, I so excited to present on my recovery activism as I practice it now, from its roots of my being in addiction detox and psychiatric hospital 15 years ago, the process of shedding the internalized stigma of filling my kit with tools and building an army and going out and making some good trouble. It's the story that I wanted to tell, and it's what I center my life around for fun, and it informs my work as well. And in the program, you'll see my bio. I'm not going to bog you down with that right now, but I'm very gratified and very fortunate to be in a position to provide technical assistance to rural communities across the country who are building up their prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery support services the way they see fit. And it's pretty exciting stuff. So I'm going to run through the presentation whilst everyone's on mute. Don't hesitate to type in your questions, your clarification requests. I'm going to throw some information at you. I'm going to provide you with some tools. And our partner Roman is going to be copying and pasting these questions into a Word doc. It's his style. It's nothing's going to be missed. And we're going to have ample space at the end to clarify, to ask questions, to share experience, and to, well, let's get this thing started.
And no names will be added to whatever I copied and paste.
That's right. Excuse me for coughing there. This is a time when even clearing your throat, you're like, hey, I swear, I'm good, I'm cool. All right, can everybody see our coyote? Very nice. Yes, okay, far out. Addiction to activism, recovery is the thing. That is the coyote clan activist. There's a story behind that. Our, our good friend Don Coyas with the White Bison Wellbriety movement. This is a national indigenous American recovery movement. He is a thought leader. He is a movement leader in our space. And that's a picture of us together eating pie, because that's one of my favorite things to do with my friends. I absolutely love pie. But he came to, at the moment, I was the executive director of our Addiction Professional Association at the time in North Carolina. I invited him to come and do an opening plenary for us. And he introduced the concept of the coyote activist. And he says, you're all a bunch of yapping, ankle-biting coyotes. And I don't know if any of y'all have experience with coyotes, but you know, that's what they are. You can't ignore them. And, you know, they take what they want, but they're still, you know, little yapping coyotes. But the exciting thing is when you gather coyotes together into a band, and that's what they are, coyotes can take down a bear. And that is exactly what we aim to do by combining our forces, a bunch of coyote clan activists. These are my disclosures. Nobody is telling me what to say. I have no financial disclosures. No piper is calling my tune right now. I'm sharing my experience with you. All of the photos and the information in here are owned by me, public domain, or shared with permission. Additionally, I throw in this humility statement. I honestly am only the expert on what's inside my melon. And my life experience over these 52 years, experiencing mental and substance use disorders and childhood trauma in America, engaging in the treatment systems, eventually finding adequate and appropriate care, eventually thriving in recovery, eventually finding my voice and getting really pissed off. That's my story, but I'm acknowledging that there in this room is a tremendous amount of lived experience. And I wish that I were there with you, that we were all together and we could start a band of our own, because I'm pretty impressed with everybody who's here. What are the objectives? Well, if you're not already pissed off, I'm hoping to help you find your outrage. If you've already got your outrage, or if you discover your outrage, I'm hoping to provide you with some tools in your kit to go out and get into what the late John Lewis tells us is some of that good trouble. So we're going to get into good trouble, go make some change, get in the way, break some machines. Very exciting stuff. Well, I'm going to lead with the chin. What is recovery? Hopefully we don't all agree on what that definition is. I certainly know that the world doesn't. I certainly know that even my closest peers with very similar experience to my own don't have the same definition. There are many official and unofficial definitions out there, particularly in the substance use space. Folks have been trying to convene some kind of consensus definition. There's a lot of disunity in our advocacy space right now. So let's explore that. I've about, I got to change some things here so I can read. There we go. I've about over 30 some years in the subculture of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, been engaging with them for over 30 years around the world. I've traveled the world in service to my country. I've attended meetings all over the world, and all throughout this country, I've read everything that they've written, and I've come up through that subculture myself. And what I aim to do, this is my definition because there's no official definition of 12-step recovery. Here's what I did. I drafted a definition based upon my personal experience and then put it out for survey amongst my peers on social media to give their input. I made some changes. This is my unofficial definition. Now, abstention from alcohol and other non-prescribed drugs. That's one way to measure you're doing the deal, right? This is not to be confused with Tradition 3, which they say the only requirement for membership in this subculture is a desire. And that's just membership within the association itself. But when a fellow sitting next to you and saying, is you doing the deal? Are you in recovery? It is measured, from my experience, by these things: a period of abstinence from alcohol and non-prescribed drugs. However, you see other asterisks specific to Narcotics Anonymous. If we are taking prescribed opioid agonists like buprenorphine and methadone, we may not be considered in recovery by that particular home group. There's some autonomy built into these communities, but overall, institutionally, it's not really considered in recovery. And then there are these 12 steps. So it's not a matter of just kind of putting the plug in the jug and showing up. Then what are you doing? Are you working these steps? Are you practicing these principles in all of your affairs? So that's fine. I'm not arguing with that. That's a splendid way of life. Individuals find that very rewarding. However, knowing what yours and others' definitions of recovery ought to be the starting point when we consider strategies to promote equitable systems of care for people experiencing mental and substance use disorders. So AA's 85-year-old lens on recovery may underpin much of our current treatment and justice policy, unfortunately, because I don't know why, but it never presented itself as a very good metric for measuring recovery from a chronic brain disorder, potentially complicated by mental disorders or homelessness or trauma. However, SAMHSA's definition, and not everybody's a fan, but personally in my recovery, I find a connection with that for my co-occurring mental and substance use disorders. And likely, my significant change in relationship with drugs has been for 15 years, but if I were to be honest about the process, I've been in this process for 3 decades. And SAMHSA says a process of change through which we improve our health and wellness. It emphasizes autonomy and self-sufficiency and potentially self-actualization. So it's a pretty cool definition, and it's wide open. There's no real concrete parts to it telling us you're not or you are. It's a process of change. Lots of questions going to be coming in on that one for sure. Within the substance use space, it's important to know that there are many pathways of recovery. I mean, this is a critical first step if you're wanting to unite communities of recovery into strategies to make positive change for people experiencing mental and substance use disorder. 12-step recovery is often present in our communities, and readily accessible. However, we have been experiencing gradually and slowly growing diversity and choice in our communities based upon our lived experience, our personal preferences, and our attributes. Very exciting here, secular and non-secular. Perhaps we want nothing to do with any concept of a deity. These all recovery meetings are pretty exciting. Innovation, it's like a Unitarian Universalist church of recovery, ecumenical culture. Come get you some. You don't have to leave your beliefs at the door, but we're also not going to hit you over the head with them. Some people are into sports. They still need some mutual aid. That's finding their community to come together. Growing mutual aid for people taking medications for opioid use disorder. They need people, and sometimes they can't find their people within traditional communities of recovery. And harm reduction mutual aid is a rare thing, but it's here. Folks who are on a pathway of reduced harm, celebrating that positive change of their own, that may be not abstinence, and it may not be I'm in recovery, but they are celebrating positive change. And why can they not celebrate it together with a group of peers, mutual aid? Many of these are available digitally. So one of the positive unintended consequences of COVID is that there's been a surge in digital recovery mutual aid meetings. And all of these are available. So maybe one isn't coming to your rural area of Oregon, but you can jump online and see what these people have to say, see what these principles underpinning these mutual aid societies are like, find people who look like you. It's pretty exciting stuff, and hopefully more physically present in communities eventually. So I talked about definitions of recovery. I talked about pathways of recovery. So 2 years ago, the American Society of Addiction Medicine revealed its strategic plan for 2018 to 2021. They strengthened their focus on the full spectrum of addiction care, previously prevention, treatment, and remission. And this new strategic vision included this concept of recovery. And it simply, it showed us, many of us, what we already knew, that there are many of us 5, 10, 20, 25, 30 years in sustained recovery. What about us? What do we look like? That we're not just treading water, we're not just clinging on, we're actually, our life has exceeded our own expectations and everyone around us. So what does that look like? So this news arguably was the most significant development in addiction treatment philosophy since ASAM defined addiction as a chronic brain disorder in 2011. So the summary is, substance use disorder is not an acute illness, and clinical stabilization is not where service relationship should end. So many of us saw this as a call to action to continue addressing social determinants of health and healthy opportunities, social determinants of recovery throughout the entire addiction care spectrum, to dismantle obstacles to wellness and citizenship for all people experiencing mental and substance use disorders. We saw We chose to see this as our responsibility to ensure that all peers have every opportunity to discover what lies beyond remission, to experience the fullness of life, and see recovery as the expectation, not the exception. And we're choosing this as a vision for America. And it's not a lofty vision, it's what we deserve. Because the indisputable fact is this: everybody experiencing mental and substance use disorders has the potential to get well, and then they have the potential to get better than well. And we see this absolutely every day. Okie dokie, artichoke. So this was a graphic that I created when I was the director of advocacy and education for a recovery community organization in North Carolina. We learned in the Surgeon General's report on alcohol, drugs, and health in 2016 that every dollar invested in prevention, treatment, and recovery saves $4 in healthcare costs and a whopping $7 in criminal justice costs. This is an inarguably rich return on investment that ought to have turned the tide and transitioned systems of punishment into systems of care. It did not. But the exciting thing is that there is an additional return on investment that everybody needs to know about when we get better than well. I'm living proof. On October 12th, 2020, I celebrated 15 years of continuous recovery from severe mental and substance use disorders, and life has continued to get better and better and better and better. I am a rich benefit to my family, to my community, to my nation, and all of this is a return on the investment of what I had access to through dumb luck and privilege. And I'll go on into that in just a moment. So those were my knees. This is me. I was born into poverty. I was born into adverse childhood experiences, into a family history of mental and substance use disorders. I was born behind the 8 ball. I got wired pretty funky from my genetics and from my environment. And I was a scrappy little survivor. But around the 5th grade, I started experimenting with tobacco. And that had a good benefit for me. And occasionally drinking and smoking cannabis by middle school. And this made me feel normal. This made me feel happy. This made me feel connected with the other boys and girls at the time. For the first time in my life, it made me feel safe. It made me feel some kind of joy. This was an amazing discovery. This was not something to characterize as a dark force coming into my life. It saved me at the moment. And this is my high school mug. Wearing I had the little dragon shirts because, I couldn't afford the alligators. So I started showing strong symptoms of what I now know, later knew to be bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress in high school, and cannabis and alcohol became a daily ritual by the time I graduated. Now thanks to a loving mother and a new stepfather, most of my chronic trauma ended by age 8, although the experiences remained clinically unaddressed. We just did not know any better. We were like, everything's okay now. But the fact is, in youth, when we experience that chaos and that pain, it often needs to be addressed, and it often manifests as mental and substance use disorders and physical health issues as well. We've learned so much about that. It's exciting. So eventually I joined the service to escape my North Carolina mountains hometown, working in a textile mill and living in a trailer with my girlfriend, which was really, exciting times. But some part of me said, I need to get the hell out of here and I need to go find some adventure. And the military had a very low threshold for engagement in the 80s. I had to quit smoking pot. They asked me only 3 questions when I joined. They asked me, are you a communist? I don't even know if they ask that anymore. They asked me, are you gay? They don't ask that anymore. And then they asked me, have you ever smoked pot? So I had to tell a few untruths. They had a very narrow view of patriotism at the time, and that fortunately has changed for the better. How about them apples? I didn't join the Navy to become a trumpet player, but I played trumpet. So when they discovered that, they drafted me to start playing at command, honor guard, and funerals. And I actually joined Naval Intelligence, which was a surprise to me. I did very poorly in high school. I was a little artful dodger, getting in trouble all the time. So this was exciting. But upon graduation from boot camp, I turned to alcohol for comfort. I drank a lot. In the 80s, the United States Navy had a very strong drinking culture. So my high tolerance for alcohol turned out to be perceived as an asset by my superiors. I cringe when I look back and I think about how much praise that I received over my tolerance for whiskey and how I could still look like I wasn't drunk and how proud that made me feel. I felt connected. I felt affirmed. I felt accomplished at the time. All those years in the woods, drinking George Dickel in North Carolina's mountains turned out to help me excel in my early years in the Navy. But daily binge drinking is not sustainable for anyone. And I ended up asking for help to get out of trouble. And over the course of my career, the Navy sent me to 3 levels of substance use disorder treatment. I served honorably and thrived in recovery for a number of years, but I fell into an extreme depression after divorcing my first wife and the upheaval of a wartime mission I had at the time at an isolated duty station. It did not end well. And after one extreme drinking episode where I totaled the command Master Chief's van, they politely asked me to leave. They gave me an honorable discharge and sent me out the door. But on the way out, they offered me one more opportunity to engage in treatment, and I turned them down. I said, I got this. I know what I'm supposed to do. It's all my fault. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste your money. And when I teach on stigma, I often refer back to this instance as one of the episodes of internalized stigma, where I firmly believe that I did not deserve treatment for substance use disorder. At the time this picture was taken, I was playing trumpet in a ska band and getting in all kinds of bad trouble. I spent the next 12 years going through the same cycle of wellness and recovery, followed by illness and alcohol and drug use. During this time, I married the love of my life. I'm still married to her. I went to school to become an English teacher, one of the many victims of watching the Dead Poets Society and Robin Williams. I said, that's what I want to do. I fathered 4 incredible children. And when I was well, I was absolutely amazing. And when I was unwell, I was heartbreaking. And some days I seemed to have everything. And unceremoniously on other days, I would throw it all away. But in October of 2004, I came to yet one more of those many jumping off points. And I couldn't look myself in the mirror. I hated myself. I wanted to die. I wanted to embrace my fate of dying alone and unloved. And I took one more look at my beloved wife and my small children, and I said, not yet. I want one more try to become that man that I want to be, to become that husband and that father, to become that citizen, and just one more. And I'm gratified that I did, because through dumb luck and privilege, I stumbled into an absolutely perfect pathway of recovery. I had an employer who gave me an entire month off of work, kept my chair for me, said, you go get right with the world. We'll hold on to your chair. You come back, we'll ease you in. I had insurance that paid for a treatment setting that recognized my co-occurring mental disorder. They used trauma-informed individual and group counseling, and this truly was a game changer, I think. The psychiatric and trauma care put me on a level playing field, helping to manage my mood disorders, teaching me to coping skills, helping me to address my trauma so that I could embrace the recovery lifestyle long enough to change inside. And additionally, I'm grateful that I continue to have health insurance and care access to receive clinical services and medications. I continue to take medications. I continue to engage in services. And healthcare ought to be a basic human entitlement, but it is not. And that is a crime. More importantly, after treatment, I transitioned into an incredibly safe and supportive place, my own home, with my own recovery supportive family. I found my people through a vast selection of peer recovery mutual aid meetings in my urban community. I spoke of those diversity of meetings earlier. I had that, and I needed that. I didn't need to have one meeting with 5 dudes offered to me and be told, this is your new crew, take it or leave it. It's okay to be selective about the company we keep. It's not a moral failing not to want to hang out with everybody. And through dumb luck and privilege, I had no criminal justice system entanglements, though I had broken the law frequently because of the way I look, because of the way I carry myself, because of what I drove and who I hung out with. I was not burdened with a felony background. So then when the time came for me to go back to school or to get jobs that did background checks, to get licensed to practice addictions therapy, to become the executive director of an organization, to engage in legislative advocacy, to get seats at tables, I had nothing holding me back. Pictures of my friends, pictures of my family at my UNC School of Social Work graduation. My wife and I together now, over 25 years, are planning what the rest of our life is going to look like. That's me there rolling with our Attorney General, Josh Stein, and his wife, Anna, at a recovery rally that I had an opportunity to organize. Life is really, really exciting. So I want to break this down for you. I found my purpose through the opportunities of meaningful work and higher education. I found my autonomy simply through the passage of time, staying alive and well long enough to experience the celebration of success, the lessons of failures, and the rewards of authentic human relationships. And that's what recovery means to me, okay? An opportunity, the space and time to find your people, find your purpose, find yourself. And that's my definition of recovery. And naturally, my throat's getting really super dry. I hope it's not annoying. So, what does the world say about recovery? What do we know about recovery? Historically, little has been known about recovery from addiction. In fact, sustained recovery as the desired outcome of treatment has largely remained an afterthought. Facts. We have access to treatment. We have crisis stabilization. We send you back to your community and we call you maybe a year later and ask you, you still good to go? And we mark you down as a positive outcome. Garbage like that. So in response to a call for recovery-focused research, Faces and Voices of Recovery, the National Advocacy Organization, in collaboration with the researcher Dr. Alexandra Laudet, conducted the first nationwide survey to document the benefits of recovery for individuals, for families, and for communities. And this is a very exciting time. What does life look like in sustained recovery for individuals? And the key findings found dramatic improvements in all areas of people's life. In the end, she simply said, the longer we stay in recovery, the better life gets. We have healthier and better financial and family life, higher civic engagement, dramatic decreases in public health and safety risks, significant increases in employment and work. And specifically, I'm going to go through some of the key findings here for you. Paying bills on time and paying back personal debt increased by 50%. 50% more people pay taxes when in recovery. Planning for the future increases nearly threefold. Involvement in domestic violence decreases dramatically. Participation in family activities increases by 50%. Volunteering in the community increases nearly threefold. Voting increases significantly. Frequent utilization of costly emergency room departments decreases tenfold. The percentage of uninsured persons decreases by half. Reports of untreated emotional mental health problems decrease more than fourfold. Involvement in illegal acts and involvement with the criminal justice system decreased tenfold. Steady employment increases by more than 50%. Twice as many people further their education. Twice as many people start their own business. These are the return on investment for appropriately, sensibly responding to substance use disorder. It not only saves billions in tax dollars, the concurrent benefits of recovery create cohorts of nearly model Americans. Some might even say great Americans. Great Americans indeed. So this is a graphic I created. I did some police conference, and I guess I was giving someone the side eye, and they took a picture of it. And so I turned it into me just watching you do some stupid shit. And I know you know better.
Donald.
Yes, sir.
One question did come up right now. Which study was that you were mentioning, I guess?
That's called Life in Recovery by Alexandra Laudet, I believe 2013. And you'll find it posted on Faces and Voices of Recovery. All that data.
And one question before that, is this compared to people who never had a mental health or substance history, or compared to people who are actively using?
This is
maybe we can get back to that.
Compared with persons experiencing an active substance use disorder. So persons in recovery versus persons experiencing an active substance use disorder. Good question.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring that to this right now while it's in the moment. Sorry about that. Continue,
you betcha.
Please.
Yeah, I haven't been keeping up with the chat. This whole digital thing, it's got me freaked out. So me looking at you, I'm asking, where's the outrage? To my peers, to my allies, and to my policymakers and funders, the mortality associated with mental and substance use disorders may be the deadliest public health crisis in American history. Yet you and I labor within underfunded, understaffed, fractured, and siloed systems to contain this crisis. Stigmatizing attitudes among policymakers and funders assures inequity remains around access to adequate and appropriate services. Stigma-driven, sometimes subconscious internal biases, even by you and me, held by behavioral health professionals, impacts the quality of care we provide. And finally, for you and me, internalized stigma, this insidious form of shame, inhibits help seeking, and even negatively impacts the outcomes of those who do finally receive care. So the solution to dismantling discriminatory barriers to wellness and freedom is undoubtedly complex. But one element is well within our capacity. We absolutely all must prioritize stigma elimination practices in our behavioral health strategies and interventions today, because language matters, science matters, stories matters, activism matters. All of these are public domain photos, so that's a pretty awesome one. So throughout the course of our work, everyone that we encounter experiencing mental and substance use disorders has the potential to get well, and then to get better than well if they have access to sufficient support. I'm personally a person thriving in sustained recovery from severe mental and substance use disorders. I did not achieve this wellness because I wanted it more than my other peers, or because I worked harder than my other peers, or because I'm morally superior to my fellows. The only reason I'm here now is because I had immediate access to adequate and appropriate treatment, robust recovery support services in my community, and then the unrestrained opportunity to fully actualize my potential because I had no criminal justice entanglements, and my reasonable share of hard work in the mix. My reasonable share of hard work in the mix. It was not all placed upon my shoulders. So I'm asking you, do not leave recovery to luck. Do not sit by while we continue to write chapter after chapter in this great American history of institutional oppression and systemic discrimination. Demand what you deserve, demand what your people deserve, and be a recovery activist. Now, how did I suddenly decide that this was a way of life for me? And it happened about 8 years ago. I was about 6 years into my recovery. I decided to work in this space, as many peers are called to do. I worked with men and women with stimulant and alcohol problems for years. I watched the nightmare of countless returns to use despite strong desires to recover, multiple arrests and extended incarcerations, lost children and destroyed families, sickness and death, whole communities experiencing unrelenting epidemic. That's our history. I witnessed the emergence and apex of a new epidemic, this time measured by staggering mortality. And today we rally around the overdose epidemic, but I want to remind folks how long it took us to actually respond to it, changing very little about how we treat opioid use disorder or reducing harm to drug users until the world's eyes on our staggering body count left the status quo as untenable. And I was part of that crap. I was a provider of services. I was complicit. As a person in recovery, I was a bystander. And so what happened? I had stigma elimination training 8 years ago. I can still remember I was anti-stigma training. It involved a number of things. It involved a documentary film about people in recovery. It involved some empowering messaging training. And I started to shed this internalized stigma. I had a new lens. I learned how to affirm my recovery status with pride. I used storytelling, telling my story with guidance from a new national recovery movement. I began using research-based, accurate, and non-stigmatizing language, not only when I referred to myself, but when I referred to the people I was serving at work. I learned how to teach lay people the complex science behind substance use disorder. I joined the National Recovery Movement, a vanguard of citizens who are affected by mental and substance use disorders, and to eliminate stigma and lead change, mobilized by recovery. And today, as a recovery activist and a macro social worker, I travel the country encouraging people to share the power of your story, to teach behavioral health science and to promote the use of accurate non-stigmatizing language and to mobilize to activate. And thriving in recovery. This is where I am. I've found my community, I've found my autonomy, and I've found my absolute purpose. And I can draw a line from this amazing life right now, 8 years back, to that stigma elimination training that addressed the internalized stigma and gave me the tools to go out and start busting skulls. And I've been doing it ever since. Pretty exciting. So what is stigma? My favorite definition of stigma comes from the International Conference on Stigma. There was a consensus definition they came to. I was drawn to this because it dealt with issues of human rights. So an attitude of a society that discredits a group or an individual because of an attribute, one mark, one ancient mark upon you, and you become that thing. It destroys the rest of the content of your character. It discredits it. You are that thing. You're that label. And when stigma turns to discrimination, it destroys dignity, it marginalizes, it violates human rights. It robs us from achieving our potential, and it's downright un-American, and it hampers the pursuit of happiness and contentment. This definition of stigma is the bomb, and this is the one that I will always use until someone supplants it with a more fiery one. What I found later, though, and more heartbreaking, is this concept of internalized stigma. So when we as a community are exposed to these stereotypes and assumptions and negative language about us, we actually begin to absorb it. And we begin to apply it, we begin to believe it, we learn to devalue ourselves, we may even learn to hate ourselves. Our symptoms worsen, we are less likely to seek help. There's lots of negative outcomes to internalized stigma. And this is the crime that has been perpetrated against us. These stigmatizing attitudes and behaviors sink into us, we believe them about ourselves, and negative public perception becomes negative public policy, and it normalizes denying us opportunities for freedom and wellness. So what kind of tools are at your disposal? This is one of my most exciting, relatively new discoveries. This is the Health, Stigma, and Discrimination Framework, a global cross-cutting framework to inform research, intervention, development, and policy on health-related stigmas. And this illustrates the stigmatizing process as it unfolds. Finally, I had a visual. I could give things names, and I could survey things with names, and I could measure things with names as outcomes. And the authors break down this process into a series of constituent domains, drivers and facilitators, stigma marking and stigma manifestations, which ultimately lead to increases rather in morbidity and mortality. You have these drivers, prejudices, biases, judgments, stereotypes, these attitudes that individuals possess or that a society may possess. And then you'll have facilitators. And the facilitators may be things like cultural norms and health policies. It allows these individual beliefs and these group beliefs to grow and to fester into actual public health policy. So a good place to start if you're engaging in stigma elimination campaigns would be measuring individual attitudes through questionnaires, individual stigmatizing attitudes through questionnaires, and through surveys mapping the facilitators in your municipality, in your state, and in your nation. So you map those. Yep.
We have a hand raised by Trinidad. Trinidad, I'm going to unmute you. Or go ahead and unmute. Do you want to say something? Hand raised. Okay.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about systemic racism for sure.
Okay. Not then. If you do have a hand raised, if you need to speak right now, go ahead.
Who sounds fuzzy? Do I sound fuzzy, or does Roman sound fuzzy?
Roman sounds funny. Donald, hear you.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's true, Roman. Perhaps your bandwidth has been diminished. Your Wi-Fi signal a little sketchy, and you sound like you're coming after us with a single red dot on your head.
Not sure.
How to serve man. Okay. Well, you know what? We'll get to the question. We'll talk about everything, and we'll definitely talk about institutional oppression. We'll talk about racism. We'll talk about white supremacy underpinning all of this garbage. Facts. All right. So this is a tool that you have, required reading, and it's free. This is absolutely free. And come get you some. And what else is free is this book right here. This is awesome. I downloaded a free PDF of this. I use it every day. Ending Discrimination Against People with Mental and Substance Use Disorders, the Evidence for Stigma Change. It is required reading. This report provides a deep understanding of stigma related to mental and substance use disorders, the science of communications, data from large-scale campaigns that have gone before us, and the evidence behind very specific tactics, such as, and these are the four I'm fixing to talk about, evidence-based stigma elimination techniques. We're not powerless to impact stigma. One is language. We absolutely must choose to use accurate and non-stigmatizing language when we're publicly speaking about ourselves, or publicly engaging in advocacy, or publicly telling our stories. Language matters. Language impacts people's perception, no matter what story we're telling. We'll read an article about this addict or this crazy person, and folks shut down. Folks see the image in their mind of this addict, and we have to absolutely stop using that. And we've evidence for it, and we've recommendations around appropriate language. The other one is contact strategy, and that's storytelling, and then education around the complex science around behavioral health disorders, and then the evidence around activating communities, how best to activate your community to go out and demand change. And of those evidence-based interventions, here's some additional free resources. So on the subject of language, the Recovery Research Institute, you see recoveryanswers.org. They are a leading nonprofit research institute dedicated to the advancement of addiction treatment and recovery. It is the repository of all the relevant research related to the role that language plays in discriminatory obstacles to wellness. And in an answer to a call for unified language, it created a really helpful tool called the Addictionary. And it's a glossary of behavioral health terms, all of them, but it gives little stigma alerts where appropriate. Definitely stigmatizing, potentially stigmatizing, but not only that, but here's why. The next free tool is Faces and Voices of Recovery. They're awesome. Faces and Voices of Recovery.org is dedicated to organizing and mobilizing people impacted by substance use disorders into recovery community organizations, or RCOs. RCOs promote human rights and access to resources through stigma eliminating advocacy and education, and storytelling by affected populations is a key strategy. So it created Our Stories Have Power, Recovery Community Messaging Training. This is a research-based training giving community members the tools to tell their stories more impactfully. My good friends at Addiction Policy Forum, addictionpolicy.org. This is a nationwide nonprofit organization dedicated to eliminating addiction as a major health problem. And they are particularly adept at translating and communicating to the general public the very complex science associated with substance use disorder, prevention, treatment, and recovery. Because we've learned so much about the brain. In the last 2 decades, we've learned so much about the causes of substance use disorder in the last decade. It's hard to keep up with. They have a free, robust library of open source videos that make this new information accessible. 4-minute video. I used to go out and teach brain science. I have a clinical degree, and I would have 30 slides explaining the science, and now I show a 4-minute video and we spend the rest of the time unpacking the information. It's pretty exciting. Our friends at Recovery Advocacy Project. This is a network of people and organizations advocating for positive change. The Recovery Advocacy Project is committed to giving people in recovery, family members, and supporters of recovery the grassroots organizing tools to think and act locally. It's a splendid website, recoveryvoices.com. Their communications are powerful. They are always activating communities around issues, yet providing the data and the talking points that you need if you wish to activate. And most states have dedicated representative volunteer leads. So someone that you can contact and say, I'd really like to activate around this issue. What you got? That's exciting, and it's free, and it's us who's doing it. And now, bam, it's time for questions, but I'm going to get rid of the PowerPoint instead of leaving this funky owl up there, but I wanted to throw this up there. If you wanted to screenshot it, if you wanted to take a picture of it, if you wanted to write down something, I'm accessible. I'm your friend. Reach out to me, follow me on social media, DMcD Recovery. Call me. I'm not selling nothing. I got a day gig. This is what I do for fun. And, you know, I hope you out. We'll break some machines. We'll go out and get in some good trouble together. So, bam, and stop sharing. And boy, I'm so sorry, folks. I just wanted to run through that mother visual and then just have some uninterrupted time to unpack this crap and make some plans. I didn't even look at the chats.
Okay, go.
Wow. Yeah, go, yeah. Wow.
Stop. Go. Go.
And you mute.
Go.
Hold on.
Can you go a little faster?
So I'm looking at.
Okay. No.
Uh-oh.
Now go forward. Go forward. There you go.
Okay, hold on. I'm trying to find. I'm gonna mute all.
But leave them the option of the ability to unmute them.
Eric, you gotta unmute now. Donald.
You muted me, man. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
everyone has the option to unmute. That's no problem.
We've not taken that power from you. We just set a level playing field from the get-go.
Someone was not muted, so, and I thought I
know.
found one, but there was more.
It was exciting. So I'm looking however you want to.
So there were no real questions, more comments and discussions going on. So if you want to,
we can run through those.
There was, I think, I'm not sure if the question came up again about what was it, that one question about what study that was?
Right. Alexandra Laudet, Life in Recovery.
There you go.
A huge survey of what it's like. And it's exciting to get that documented.
So I don't know if you want to.
So some gratitude for sharing my story, some opinions
Yes.
about what recovery definitions are.
You are looking at it, right? Yeah.
Yep. I'm rolling through it.
How is my audio now? Am I okay?
Sweet. You don't sound like a robot anymore. You sound like one of us.
And I heard that
You're-
before in another one.
Great. It's good now, Roman.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It reoccurs, so I don't know what happened here.
And so the question about the study, compared to people.
Someone wants to know where we can get a copy of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'll share it. Absolutely. I'll share it with the organizers, and we'll make it available for sure. Use it.
Yes.
Hell yeah. Someone tried several times to break free. This last time, encompassing levels of support and guidance, solid footing. Yeah. Substance use disorder lives on a spectrum, and some of us, we don't need this or that. We may need housing. We may need a friend. We may need crisis stabilization. We may need continuing robust supports. It differs for all of us, but it ought to be available for everyone.
So there is a question. What is your favorite way to use your story in recovery?
Right. Well, the contact strategy in its purest sense is connect. If I can still do this, and it happens, is when you connect with someone first, and then you reveal later to them that added layer of your person. And my best story of this is I was a preschool teacher at about 4 years in recovery, maybe less, and a preschool teacher in a church. And I was ashamed. And our meeting met in the basement of that church. So it was on weekends. So I thought I could avoid seeing the pastor or the other mothers. And occasionally we would hear some footsteps in the hall, and it might be one of them, and we keep the doors closed. But I had the awesome responsibility of setting up the meeting at this time. And I was just whistling and singing and setting this thing up, and standing behind me was the pastor, the preacher. And he said, "Donald," and he loved me, by the way. I was his only male preschool teacher. I was a musician, and I taught music to the students and everything. I was a veteran. He didn't know about the complications and everything. So he had a very high perception of me, a high value of me. And he says, "I'm so proud of you, son, for helping these people." And I said, "Dude, I'm one of these people." And he could not discredit the years we had together. He had to fold this component in, and it completely turned his perception upside down. And hopefully, as the spiritual leader of his flock, it had a positive impact on a whole bunch of folk. So contact strategy in its purest form is making a connection with someone there, feeling your value, whatever, and then folding in that. I don't always have that luxury now because my recovery is headlines now, but yeah.
So Donald, there's a question that just came up. If you want to scroll down to the last question from
Last one.
The very last one. I'll have 21 years clean. November 2nd.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. So even 21 years into sustained substance use recovery, the trauma, is still present. you no longer have the urge to use substances, but to struggle with your wellness and safety and comfort and absence of trauma. I get that. And there is trauma-informed continuing care for folks. One thing that I found particularly helpful was a group of peers, honestly. A group of peers, and this was also dumb luck that many of us had kind of similar traumatic experiences, and they were not trained, you know, so a bit of it was clumsy, and who knows if we harmed more people than we helped. I eventually received the training to more mindfully and ethically engage in discussions about trauma, but finding a peer with potentially similar experiences and some level of training, and definitely listening at the very least about it. And then professional counseling. Obviously, there are evidence-based ways to address how childhood trauma continues to pull our strings today. But I'm not a clinician, and I was briefly, and just didn't find it as a rewarding experience. I dig the freedom of peer work. I dig the freedom of recovery coaching. I dig not having a predetermined outcome. I dig not having to keep case notes. Yep.
So there's another one that says question right in front of it.
Gotcha. Sharing my story. Okay, in my new role, I will be sharing my story publicly eventually. My story does include being abused as a child. My parents refused to listen to my story because they were part of it. How can I address what happened with them growing up so it's not a shock to them someday when my story is heard by them? I can relate. I can relate with you. I wrote a blog about our stories have more power, peeling back the layers. And honestly, my adding childhood trauma to my story is a bit of a recent thing in the last couple of years. In the beginning, it was very substance use specific. Eventually, it rolled in my experience with severe mental disorders, and eventually it rolled in trauma. I don't know, man. Talking when the parents are involved, I don't know if sometimes it may never be appropriate to talk to them about it, or I'm sure there'll be suggestions in the room, maybe even a general disclosure of, I've discovered that telling my story is not only therapeutic for myself, but is empowering to others. And there are parts of my story that involve trauma I experienced as a child. And I just wanted to let y'all know that I will be sharing that with folks. That might be one thing, but that's purely theoretical. That's off the top of my head. And I don't know your specific situation. But if that resonates with anyone, or if anyone has any experience of ultimately, you know, bringing your folks into, I'm fixing to say some things about you. Yeah. Thank you, Jim. And spirituality. Spirituality is evidence-based prevention. It is evidence-based recovery. It's a pretty cool bit of recovery capital to have if one has it. That's splendid. I have concerns about primary interventions being rooted in it specifically. I see it more as an ancillary support, you know. But spirituality, connectivity to something greater than ourselves, our fellow humans, and then maybe even something beyond has helped to give some meaning to me as well.
So there's something that says you mentioned a 4-minute video.
Yeah. Addiction Policy Forum. Yeah, Addiction Policy Forum has a YouTube channel. And check it out, or go to addictionpolicy.org. And 4-minute animated video brings in all the most accurate and current science of prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery, makes it accessible for lay folk. And honestly, it has a a internalized stigma eliminating component to it as well. When I learned the science of what was going on when I got hijacked by substances from an early age that potentially was self-medicating, that I learned that when I finally stopped using substances at the age of 37, all of the things that I had to learn that I ought to have learned in adolescence and through young adulthood, you know, like bringing comfort to myself, delayed gratification, the small delights of natural rewards, all these things we have to learn. And that's the disordered learning theory of recovery. And all that's covered. It's really cool to watch and to learn as much as possible. Yep. Thanks, Andrew. You bet. Hope I didn't step on my tongue. Off the cuff. The documentary film that I mentioned that played a crucial role in transitioning me into from shame to outrage was The Anonymous People, 2013, The Anonymous People. Changed Everything by Greg Williams. Pretty cool. And I'm good. All right. Thanks, Andrew. You're going to kill it, man. You're going to kill it. And the thing to be mindful of in storytelling for me is to be mindful of potentially inaccurate and stigmatizing language, to be potentially mindful of the darker icky bits because we are, whatever the goal is. My goal was to change public perception of people impacted by substance use disorder and what recovery looks like. So when they wanted to get into some gritty details about how much cocaine, I'm like, none of your business.
None
None of your business. Enough. Still paying off that debt. So keeping it into, you know, the anatomy of in the 12-step community is what I was like, what happened, and what I am like now. And so a bit of brevity on the very first part, a bit of clarity on the second part. Sometimes when we get into storytelling, we can be too brief or maybe even too a little metaphysical, and we say it was a miracle, or it's because I finally wanted it bad enough. That stigma was still driving it. We don't say, as I did, the scope of support that was just thrown at me, the level of recovery capital that I possessed, and then the unrestrained opportunity because I never got hemmed up with a drug conviction. You know, so that piece is important, but the bigger piece is what I'm like now, because that's what we call living proof. You know, you're living proof, and no one can argue with who you are now because you're there, putting it in their face. Yeah. Still paying off that debt. Yeah, that's crazy, man. That's crazy. My story is not about my got you. Yeah. Yeah, positivity. It's our story to tell about ourselves, and we can be general about the co-stars in it and the bystanders in it. Folks will get it, you know, but it is our story to tell, and probably best not to throw folks under the bus too badly when we tell our stories. I generalize. I say I'm in recovery from childhood trauma. I was born into poverty. I was born into an absolute perfect storm of adverse childhood experiences, and folks can simply do a web search to see what those are. You know, what are ACEs? Had them all, and what have you. I keep it general.
Donald, I wanted to convey my appreciation to you, saying that when your recovery started, it wasn't necessarily like alcohol and drug and stuff, just recovery in general. I mean, I myself, I know my recovery many years before I actually stopped using alcohol and drugs and taking care of myself, just a spiritual thing, you know, coming to grips with my you know, my past ACEs and all the other stuff, and just repairing my life. So that's the start of my recovery when I did my longest walk. So thank you for that, because many people see recovery as, oh, you're recovering from alcohol and drugs, you're recovering from mental diagnosis or whatever, but they don't see that, you know what, I'm recovering from my past life as well, and I'm making a new life. So it's not for a lot of us, it's not just the alcohol and drug.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is while I'm deeply gratified for the 8 decades of foundational, you know, community experience of the 12-step community, one of the shortcomings is so you know, myopically almost focusing recovery as a chronological measure of the absence of alcohol and non-prescribed drugs. And I'm like, dude, you're telling me this as you're chain smoking, slamming donuts, and fucking around on your wife. You know, come on, let's get real. Sorry for my French.
It's all good.
It's good. Okay.
I'm sure many of us have used worse.
So there is a movement, and when I tell my story, I try to say, you know, that's why I embrace the SAMHSA, the process. Recovery is a journey, not an event, and it's not a linear process or you know, linear escalation. That it was in 1986 when I really started this journey, but you know, a sustained trajectory started in 2004. And it has not been perfect either. You know, I have had, while I have not had return to substance use, you know, I've had, you know, I've gone down some dark alleys. Yeah. Cool. But thank you for pointing that out. Hopefully there's be a greater movement, and that way it's more inclusive and less siloing of folks in mental health recovery and folks in substance use recovery. When, you know, so many of us have that shared experience, and even the storytelling guidance by Faces and Voices initially was by the measure, which means I haven't taken alcohol and other drugs for 10 years. And then I changed it when I teach it to communities to fold in this process thing. You know, how do we tell our stories about recovery from mental health recovery? You know, does each triggering event cause me to reset the clock, or does any outburst, does a hospitalization require me to reset the clock? And I just think that's too much of a burden and too much of a inaccurate measure. You know, how many years you got? You know, okay, I want what you have. But I've met some dudes with 3 decades who are absolute assholes. Facts. Facts. Doing all that stuff. But any other good stuff here? 5 new messages. The time away from drink is as a status. Yeah. And that's one thing that I found, that while I was proud of the period of time that when there was a time when I was held hostage by alcohol and drugs, you know, I'm proud of that period of time. But then I also began to discover how non-inclusive it was within my peer group, within the people I was serving when I was a provider of services. That it was kind of an elitist thing on my part. And I continue to be proud of it, but it's not my sole measure of wellness anymore. And it will be an indicator of unwellness if I do find myself having a drink of alcohol or misusing even a prescribed substance, it would be a nice indicator that something may not be. I might need to take a look under the hood. Age 63, we were reborn. Thank you, Marie. I appreciate that. Wow. So we're down to our, it looks like our last 2 minutes. Roman, do you have closing comments to holler at these folks, what they have to look forward to tomorrow?
Well, whatever you're registered for, feel free. And tomorrow is the Pure Apocalypse Got Talent. I figured what it's called. And Mad Hatter Dance. Join us virtually. I want to thank Donald McDonald. It has been enlightening. And the whole title, Addiction to Activism, I have past activism life as well, and I think that's what brought a lot of us into the field that we're in as peers and whatnot, to be active in the recovery community and sort of push the boundaries and restructure it a lot of times. And I when I was in school, one of my teachers challenged us to do that whenever we brought up that, medically assisted treatment is frowned upon in AA or even in recovery homes or recovering places, and people working in their practicums and in their internships saying, "Well, why don't you change it? You are the new breed. Change it. Speak up. Yeah. And I that's what drew me to your presentation, and I'm sure everyone here, in one way or another, has their own reason, but I appreciate you and thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Go out and get into some good trouble. And I will send the PDF of this PowerPoint to the organizers and post it on my website too. So just in case you don't get it emailed to you, dmcdrecovery.org. I'm not selling nothing. I'm paying for a website just so I can blog on it and put funny pictures on it and stuff like that, so cool.
Well, thank you.
All right, y'all.
Thank you to everyone who participated.
Thanks.
We'll end it now. Enjoy the rest of it. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.